Um, Not only are people joining us from Congregation or Torah, but maybe some other first responders in the community, particularly members of Hatzalah, and I welcome you joining us tonight. Thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing. And I wanted to open with that really for all the healthcare workers. That includes people who are working in nursing homes. That includes people who are in private practice, who are struggling now economically with what's been unfolding the last period of time, but also especially all of those who are on what I would call the front lines of this crisis, day in and day out. I've heard from a number of members of our shul who are pretty actively engaged in treating people with COVID-19, lo aleinu, both here in Chicago, but also on the East Coast. I want to share with you a few thoughts tonight that I hope can be of a source of chizuk, if nothing else. And really, I wanted to just get us all to be able to be on a call, however briefly, in order to appreciate the moment in which we live. There was an article that appeared today, in fact, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal. It's a story about a fellow whose name is Gabe Scuderi. He lives in New Jersey. For 24 years, Gabe Scuderi had a job, not a purpose. And that changed one afternoon last month when he returned home from the Lysol factory where he works. And he found his daughter waiting for him. She'd been waiting for him, watching news coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. She told him that by manufacturing the disinfectant spray, he was, quote, literally helping to save the entire world right now. So Mr. Scuderi, 54-year-old Italian immigrant to the United States, remembers that moment in sharp definition. He told the Wall Street Journal, it's the first time I felt this isn't only a job, we're on the front lines now. I suspect that those of us who are engaged in refuat haguf in one capacity or another, whether as first responders or whether we're engaged in it on a hospital setting or in a private practice, we appreciate, as do those who are engaged in mental health work. I see on the list here, there's some people who are mental health professionals who are engaged much more in the world of refuat hanefesh. We understand that both of these are part and parcel of what we daven for as Jews all the time. We just came from the holiday of Pesach. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Iyar, but it is the last night of Chodesh Nisan. It's the 30th day of Nisan now. Wish everyone a Chodesh Tov and a good Erev Shabbos, of course. And Chodesh Nisan was characterized, hopefully will be remembered, not only for the challenges, but also for the celebration of Yetziat Mitzrayim. The culminating moment of the crossing of the Reed Sea of the Kriyat Yamsuf, where Kadosh Baruch Hu held us, so, as it were, in the palm of his hand and enabled us to cross through the Reed Sea to defy the natural order. What's interesting is that immediately thereafter, there's the story of Mara, bitter water. Instead of a Kadosh Baruch Hu just making a nace and there not being bitter water, Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, confront the bitter water. They complain about the bitter water. Moshe Rabbeinu davens regarding the bitter water. And instead of a Kadosh Baruch Hu saying, well, your tefillah was answered, now it's sweet, Hashem tells him, there's a tree over there. Take that tree and put it in the water, and that will sweeten the water. Vayorehu eitz. He showed him the tree. He showed him how to fix his problem with some other element within nature. To me, the miracle here, the sign, the nace in the sense of a banner, miracle meaning a nace, meaning a banner. And I say that because it does describe Visham Nisahu, which means in one level, Shem tested the Jewish people. It also means he held up a banner for Klal Yisrael. The banner is Kadosh Baruch Hu made a world for us that has so many mysteries, so many things that make us afraid. And our tefillot sometimes are that Kadosh Baruch Hu should save us, Yeshua Hashem keheref ayin. And this is a crucial tefillah, even now. But another type of tefillah that we ought to have is the tefillah of Moshe Rabbeinu right after Kriyat Yamsuf. Is not answered by a Kadosh Baruch Hu saying, I will just make the water sweet. Of course, he's the Borei Olam. He's the Manhig of the Olam at all times. He has the Keter Melucha every single day and every single instant. And yet he chose to tell Moshe Rabbeinu, you already have the solution in front of you. You're going to have to find it. I'm going to show it to you now. And the reason why I think this is so important for us to bear in mind, those of us who are engaged in healthcare professions, is because of the last pasuk with which that section is sewn up. Vayomer, Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu and to Klal Yisrael by extension, Mishmoah tishma l'kol Hashem Elokecha, v'yashar be'einav ta'aseh, v'azant l'mitzvotav, v'shamata kol chukav. So it will be if you will listen to the voice of Hashem, your God, and do that which is upright in his eyes. That is to say, make judgment calls. Not everything is going to be legislated in a book. Even the Taryag mitzvot still require us, as the Ramban writes, Vasita Yoshva Tov in that pasuk, not every case could be carried through in Shas. A person has to use their shikul hadat, has to use their sense of being able to analyze and their faculty of judgment in order to be able to discern a way forward. And we daven for help for this. But also, v'azant l'mitzvotav, to hearken to Hashem's mitzvahs, v'shamarta kol chukav, to keep all of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's edicts. And then, kol hamachla asher samti mitzrayim lo asim alecha. All the disease that I've placed upon Egypt, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Klal Yisrael, I will not place upon you. Why? Ki ani Hashem rofecha. Because I, Hashem, am your doctor. This is what we're davening every single day. This is what it means in the Amidah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we refer to him in the second bracha of the Amidah as a Rofei Cholim. It's every day, 3 times a day. And to recognize this is to realize the great and awesome responsibility, but also the great and awesome privilege that it is for those of you on this call who are engaged on any level in a healthcare profession. Could there be a greater imitatio day? That's a way of saying to be like a Kodesh Baruch Hu. V'alachta bidrachav, we would say in halachic terminology. To imitate Hashem, to emulate the way of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, to bring healing. Of course, no one's allowing that to go to their head. We know our place. And yet, Ki ani Hashem rofecha, clearly Klal Yisrael knew what a rofei was. And they also knew that a Kodesh Baruch Hu was telling them, if you listen to the mitzvahs, Hashem will be your doctor. The description here of what Rashi teaches us on this very pasuk is that through Torah and mitzvot we are saved. It's like a doctor saying to a person, don't eat this food. It's not good for you. Don't do this. Don't do that. Be careful. Take good care. A doctor encourages an individual, wants an individual, first of all, not to get sick. That's not to say there is an illness in the world. Rashi knew very much about illness as well, unfortunately, in his time, as we do in ours. But the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us a certain recipe and giving us a certain modus vivendi, a way to live, and to be able to do so with a sense of purpose and connection to him, come what may. Now, there could not have been a better parsha for us to have this little meeting here at the nexus between the end of the time period of Chodesh Nisan, typified, in fact, by the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael on that first station after the time period, the moment of Kriyat Yamsuf, Ki ani Hashem rofecha. But we're gathering on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the Chatam Sofer on Masechet Shabbat, others as well, the Shar Ephraim, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zechat Tzaddik Kodesh Livracha was fond of quoting this. So that the word Iyar could be read homiletically as the words Ani Hashem Rofecha. Homiletically, it's an acronym for I am Hashem, your Rofeh. And indeed, as some of the commentators point out, the time period of the spring, whether because the air changes or because it's a more hopeful time, it's a time period of healing. And so may it be for us as well. But there could not have been a better time for us to gather, albeit digitally, electronically, than Parshiot, Tazria, and Mitzorah. According to the Meshech Chochmah, he thinks it's really based right there in the Medrash. You know what Sarat is? Some people translate it as leprosy, really it has spiritual causes, etc. But the Medrash does say in Vayikra Rabbah, and it's quoted by the Meshech Chochmah, that in fact, it was a contagious disease. It was a contagious disease. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Vayikra Rabbi Yochanan says, Asur leilch b'mitzorah chosham mitzorah arba amot. One may not cross within 4 cubits, aka 6 to 8 feet, of a person who has tzara'at. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu mea amma, can't even go within 100 amma of this individual. Says the Medrash, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, who often disagreed, do not actually disagree. Manda amar arba amot b'shah she'ena ruach yotzei. The one who holds, Rabbi Yochanan says, don't come within 6 to 8 feet. That's when there's no wind blowing. Manda amar mea amma, when did it say 100 cubits? B'shah she'ruach yotzei. When there's wind blowing. It goes on to describe that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Ashi would not go up to the doorways of anyone who was a Mitzorah. Rabbi Meir would not eat eggs that came from the stalk that belonged to a Mitzorah. And so on and so forth is the description. Indeed, that's the description also in the Torah. Tamei, tamei yikra. They should call out before the Mitzorah, here comes someone who is impure. Here we are, entering Chodesh Iyar, and we're learning about contagion. What's fascinating and puzzling is that there is no mask that is going to be worn by the Kohen per se. Although when you keep reading Parsha Tazria, it does say, Vasafam ya'ateh, which literally means the person who's a Mitzorah has to cover their mouth, cover their mustache, cover themselves over. Sound familiar? But how could the Kohen be so close? I had this running discussion with one of the doctors in our congregation who year over year, whenever we give a drasha, Tazria Mitzorah, say, it's nothing more than a virus, right? It's just a contagious disease, right? I say, no, it's not really. It has all sorts of spiritual causes. And we would get into it. And I would always say, the proof that I have is the Kohen does not wear any protective gear. So clearly it's not a physical issue. How do you reconcile that with the Midrashim I just quoted? The Meshech Chochmah reconciled it. He said because the Kohen, who has to stand in the presence of the Mitzorah, has to have an extra degree of Hashgacha Pratit to do what needs to be done. An extra degree of divine providence. The Kohen is the individual who is called upon to a higher level of service. And therefore, it has to be Aaron. Now, Aaron, a Kohen, has to be either Aaron or it has to be one of his children who are going to be the individuals who are going to specifically be standing by to diagnose and then to care for the Mitzorah. And that means that a Kohen needs to be aspiring to a higher spiritual level. It means that a Kohen who is going to be in the presence of danger realizes that the notion of din, of judgment, is, God forbid, more in the environment where they will be. They've put themselves there. It's a calling. One could say it's a divine calling. Certainly when one is a Kohen. I would venture to say an individual goes in to become a medical professional, engaged in a healthcare profession, ought to see themselves in the manner I spoke about before. An individual is Valachta Bidrachav, Mahu Rofe, I would venture to say, Af Ata. So you try to also be a healer on our level. And still, and all, to recognize that there is a certain danger in what we're engaged in. If we are a healthcare professional, engaged in Refuat Haguf, and I would venture to say even sometimes contagion that has to do with the Refuat HaNefesh, with spiritual, which is close and related to the world of the psychological and the emotional as well. One other thought from the Meshech Chochmah, and then a short story to conclude. The other thought is that at the beginning of the parsha, of the section about Tzarat in Parshat Tazria, there's a repetition, and I want you to listen for two words that are repeated at the beginning and the end of toward the end of the same pasuk. V'ra'ah hakohen et hanega be'or habasar v'se'ar b'nega hafach lavan u'mar'eh hanega amok me'or b'saro nega tzaratu v'ra'ahu hakohen v'timei oto. V'ra'ah hakohen at the beginning, v'ra'ahu hakohen at the end of the pasuk. Asked Rabbi Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk in his magisterial Meshech Chochmah, why the repetition? To see and to see. And he answered as follows. The first time the Kohen looks, he has to make a diagnosis that is on a biological level. What are the symptoms that present augur for this individual? And what's the course of treatment? That's prescribed by the Torah, but how to carry it out and to explain that to the individual if that's in fact a diagnosis. But what is the second V'ra'u HaKohen? Hushiyira HaKohen ala ish im ra'ui letumato. That the Kohen should see if the individual is worthy of becoming impure. And he explains. Sometimes it's a chatan, and the chatan is in the middle of the 7 days of feasting. Sometimes the middle of a holiday. So we want to give this person a few more days. Yes, it's true. They have to be held at bay in terms from exposure to other people, in terms of the contagion component. But the psak din will render another 7 days of confinement and isolation. So the Kohen has to engage, and Simcha Kohen, himself a Kohen, writes it this way, quoting from the book of Mishlei, Drachea darchei Noah. The ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness. To say it differently, I'm extrapolating from the Meshech Chochmah, the Kohen needs to not only make a physical diagnosis, but needs to also account for the emotional state of the person with whom they're engaging. As Mori V'Rabbi, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zechut Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livracha, explained it on several occasions. His Yortzeit is coming up this Shabbos, Aleph Iyar, so I'll say in his name. The idea that all of halacha is always telling us not to be passive, but active, and to always be mindful, to think in broad categories, and when it comes to human beings, never to see them as objects or patients, but rather as agents, not as things, but as beings. And I think that's part of what it means to talk about refuah in our day and age. I've heard some really heartrending stories the last period of time of individuals who never thought in a million years, notwithstanding their medical training, that they would find themselves in the crucible of having to be the next of kin, essentially representing the next of kin, at the bedside of someone who had just a short while left to live. But that has come upon us. And I think it's important that as our two eyes are one in sight, as Robert Frost once said in another context, the doctor, standing in here as the Kohen, if you will, has to be able to see a patient not only in terms of the biological needs, but also the totality of the individual. And here I think we come to the idea of that reconciliation between that particular doctor who's always after me, Parshas Tazria Mitzora, year over year, when I claim it's spiritual and he claims it's physical. The answer is, of course, it's always both. Both in cause, which we, who have no Navi, who have no Ruach HaKodesh, have no right to dare to decide. We understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu today in terms of why such a thing happened personally to individuals or generally to the world. We know that it must be a message, however. Nothing in our world, nothing can we dismiss as meaningless, certainly not crises. And we know also that individuals who are suffering are never just suffering on a physical level. They're always suffering also on a spiritual level. If you ever said, Mishaberach L'cholim, as I opened, so I'm coming to a close now, Refuat HaNefesh, or Refuat HaGuf. We don't want the one without the other. We want the Guf and the Nefesh both to be better, to feel better. HaGaon Mikutna, Rav Trunk, would say on this exact pasuk, the same kind of idea, that one must not only look at the individual's nega, at their wound, at their sore, at their disease or ailment, but rather v'ra'au hakohen, to really see the totality of the person. It's of a kind with what the Meshech Chochmah says. I want to close now with something having to do with tefillah, and this should be fairly obvious, but I'm concerned sometimes in speaking to friends and family and congregational family about sometimes a little bit of a bifurcation between one's vocation, a professional role, versus the sense that they have the workplace and then they have the home and the shul as some other magisterium. One of Rav Lichtenstein's Rebbeim was Rav Yitzchak Kutner, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livracha, who in one of his letters was writing to a student who was asking him various questions, not to go into all the details now, but the questions had to do with a bifurcation within life. And Rav Hutner said to him, you're getting it wrong. There's no bifurcation in our lives as Jews. And here's the example that he gave. He said there's a doctor at Shari Tzedek Hospital in his time named Dr. Wallach. Dr. Wallach apparently was a well-regarded surgeon. And in Shari Tzedek, and I know it's not possible in every hospital, but this is the story, at least in Shari Tzedek Yerushalayim HaKodesh, as he would wheel a patient in right before they would be placed under anesthesia, he would ask them for their name and their mother's Hebrew name so that he could daven for them before he performed the surgery. And he writes that when he told this story, Rav Hutner told this story, he said to one of the Gedolei Yerushalayim, he said, I happened to be sitting with a Gadol in Yerushalayim, and I told him this, that Dr. Wallach says to the patient, can I have your name? I'd like to daven for you. He's the surgeon. He told this to a Gadol. The Gadol said to him, quote, Kama tzarich lekanot b'Yehudi zeh, sheyesh lo hizdamnut kol kach gdola l'shamesh kli sharet lichvod shamayim. How much does one have to be envious of such a Jew who has the opportunity, such a great opportunity to serve as a vessel to augment the glory of Shamayim, of heaven, in this world? Writes Rav Hutner to his student, Hagidan li ha'emet, tell me the truth, ahuvi chabibi, my beloved one, my dear one. Ha'im amirat perek Tehillim lishlomo shel chole al yedei harofe. Do you think that the saying of a chapter of Tehillim by the doctor for a patient who is under that doctor's care, homid lasot et hanituach, he's actually the one who's going to physically do the surgery. Ha'im zehu double life. He writes it in English. Double life. Rav Hutner says to him, Chazal teach us a strange thing. When a Jew says Shema, they should be, as the Gemara describes it, kol hamarich be'echad, marichin lo yamav v'shnotav. When you say Shema, when you say the word Echad at the end of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, if you elongate Echad, if you carry it out, so you'll have a long life. Said Rav Hutner, is this magic? Rav Hutner said to him, here's what Chazal mean. It's right here in the letter. What it means is that an individual who elongates the word Echad, the word one, is an individual who is by so doing integrating every aspect of their own life. Their role as friend and child and sibling, and if there's zocha to be a parent, if there's zocha to be a spouse, to be a doctor, to be a healthcare professional, and also at the exact same time, to be an Eved Hashem. And this is the idea, that if you're marich, the word echad, then you show that you are living an integrated life, that one and the other do not exist as separate magisteria. That a Jew who has a connection to Torah and mitzvot, who is driving a Hatzalah truck or jumping to help someone in that capacity, that a Jew who is engaged in a private doctor's office, an individual who is walking the halls of a nursing home, or who is in a hospital, lo aleinu, in the ICU in the COVID unit, should appreciate that they are engaged in being marbik vod shamayim with every step that they take, with every aspect of their behavior, and especially if it's not opportune for various legal reasons to ask people, if you don't know their faith, can I pray for you now? You don't want to unnerve them. But at the same time, that's also for us, to each of us, to remember that we work for him. And ultimately, he's really the Rofei Cholim, a doctor, a nurse, a healthcare professional, anyone engaged in healthcare is just a Shliach Hashem. Ashreichem, any of you who have taken this on as your chosen vocation. Ashreichem, any of you who have taken this on as an avocation and you're volunteering your time. Ashreinu matov cholkenu umanayim gor aleinu, that we live at a moment where we can be engaged in such things as helping to save people. Yehi ratzon, we should be doing this with all measure of humility, all measure of looking at the totality of the individual, and that we are davening for the refuat hanefesh and the refuat haguf of every individual with whom we have come in contact and will come in contact, of course, is created b'tselem Elokim. And let's gather again soon, b'mher b'yameinu, hopefully within the month of Iyar, Rashi Tevot, Ani Hashem Rofecha, homiletically, the time period of refuah, of healing. And we should be zoche to see this entire crisis pass before our very eyes, just as it came so quickly. It should leave so quickly. Yeshuat Hashem, Keheref Ein, salvation of Hashem can come with the blink of an eye. And we'll be zochem in this period of time to the Geula Hashlem of Amitit, to welcome Mashiach Tzidkenu into the binyan of the great house of the Bayit Hagadol v'Hakadosh in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, B'meher B'meinu. I wish everyone Erev Shabbat Shalom and a Chodesh Tov. Thanks so much for being on the call. And anyone who wants to reach out to me on a personal level to talk, I'm here, and I'm certainly ready, willing, and able.